Hello all and welcome to our daily news show, The Big Story, where we talk about the hottest topics of today right in the heart of the newsroom. I'm Kimberly Jiao, coming to you live from the Straits Times, and we are streaming on Facebook and YouTube, so do leave us a like, comment and share it with your friends, as well as click that bell to be told whenever we go live. I will be joined by my colleagues from the newsroom later on to discuss the stories that got you talking today. Our first story, the United Nations held a special action summit about climate change on Monday, September 23rd. And not just any world leader was allowed to speak at this summit. In fact, this excluded Brazil, Poland, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. And with us to talk about this, my apologies, is climate change editor David Fogarty and environment correspondent Audrey Tan. Hello.
Hi.
So this summit happened, last night. And before we get into the details with you guys, teen activist Greta Thunberg actually opened this summit with a speech. So let's have a look.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
So she's very passionate about this matter, right? Because she's saying how urgent it is. But actually, this is not a new thing, correct? This urgency is not new at all.
That's correct. I mean, scientists have been telling the public and politicians for years that climate change is a growing problem, is a growing challenge. The effects are already here and being felt more keenly, and we know what to do. This is a problem that mankind has produced, right? It's not something that's been imposed upon us. And we need to cut emissions, and quickly and deeply. This has been the mantra for many years within the UN, amongst climate scientists, and we just have not acted with that necessary urgency. And now we're basically on a train ride at the last stop before it goes over the cliff. I mean, we've totally run out of time.
Right. So with that metaphor in mind, when we talk about the UN Climate Summit, how did the world leaders sort of react? What was the outcome of the summit?
So there were many positive things at the summit, and there were some unfortunate displays of lack of action. So the good stuff to start off with would be there were a lot of coalitions that sort of got together, like the 30 new and updated sort of pledges of action amongst banks, pension funds, asset managers, cities, even shipping companies. There are a lot of non-government actors that really want to do something about climate change, and many of them sort of control, up to trillions of dollars, particularly in the case of the asset managers and banks. So they want to, if you like, decarbonize their portfolios. They want to get away from fossil fuels, get away from big polluting companies. To the point of getting to the aim of being net zero by 2050, which is a key UN goal. And you have, there was a group of about 66 countries that pledged net zero emissions by 2050. So that was quite positive. But most of these are small countries that are, really on the front line. So they're very keen to act.
Right.
Then you had a country like Finland, which is, quite a wealthy country. It pledged basically to be the only industrialized country so far to absorb more emissions than it produces.
Wow.
But where the summit sort of failed, I think, was the biggest emitters did not heed the UN Secretary General's call to really go for stronger action. They did not put down any plans that really showed much deeper ambition to cut emissions.
Right.
China is the world's top polluter and has been something of a climate champion. But it said it wouldn't announce any new climate plans until next year. They're a little bit worried about where the trade war is going. They're also concerned about the impacts on the economy. So they're not quite ready to get there yet. But
Right.
the expectation is that they will announce something stronger next year.
Right. And the US is also one of the countries that sort of didn't submit any of their proposals.
No,
right?
no, not with. I mean, Donald Trump is a climate skeptic. He's more keen on sort of drilling in protected oil reserves and
Right.
ramping up domestic, gas production, oil. He sees as dirty as good. You know.
Right. So speaking of the different countries, what did Singapore specifically, if you can bring it locally, what did Singapore bring to the table at the UN Climate Summit?
So Singapore laid out what it's doing now, and it has its own areas of ambition that it feels that the government feels that it can do now.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anything new on the table. But then Singapore and many other countries, there was not an expectation or a duty to deliver anything, at the summit. The whole idea of the summit was really to inject a bit of urgency into the Paris Climate Agreement. And under that agreement, all the signatories, nearly 200 of them, agreed that a process in which every 5 years, starting in 2015, nations would agree and set out more ambitious climate actions every 5 years. So
Right.
Each 5 years is stepwise more ambitious. So that process doesn't have to be completed till the end of next year. So I guess we're expecting Singapore, along with China and many others, to complete that process.
Right. We can only hope, I guess, at the end of 2020. And actually, speaking of Singapore, the first Singapore Climate Rally was organized by young people in solidarity with the global youth climate movement, and it happened on Sunday, 22nd September. And Audrey, actually, David, you both were there, right? How was it like?
It was actually held on Saturday, September 21st.
My apologies.
So the global school strikes for climate were actually held on Friday, the Friday before. The reason why the organisers chose Saturday was because they wanted to inject a uniquely Singapore flair into the movement, and also to be able to get everyone in Singapore to take part in the event. So yeah, on Saturday when we were there, I think the organisers said more than 2,000 people showed up.
Ooh.
Yeah, and when we were there, we really did see the crowd. I felt that the mood was high despite the heat. Everyone is very active in taking part in the activities, whether it's like writing postcards urging stronger climate ambition to their MPs, whether it's taking part in banner painting where they talked about why it's important for Singapore to ramp up their ambition, and also carrying placards. So some of the more memorable ones I saw were things like, I stand for what I stand on. Yeah, and
Nice.
protect your mother, I think referring to Mother Earth. Like what were some of the other placards that stood out for you?
Taxi my memory there. There was one about beer, I think.
Oh yeah, no beer on warming planet or dying planet or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very unique placards out in the open.
Yeah. So
And there was another clever one there was a mural that was being painted, and it was for the greater good.
Yeah.
Okay, so a play on word with Greta
I
Thunberg.
think Greta Thunberg sort of permeated right throughout that event. I mean, she was quite an inspiration.
yeah, and a lot of the attendees were dressed in red. So the organisers had urged them to come in red because when I asked them why, they said, because red signals emergency. Like I guess, when we think of emergencies, like it's always red, right? The big red button.
Right.
So a lot of them did turn up in red, and we were all given a red chalk. Like
to
because
enter.
because Singaporeans and non-Singaporeans and non-PRs were not allowed to take part in the rally due to restrictions surrounding the use of Hong Lim Park. But we saw people standing outside the perimeter, in fact, like holding their own placards and stuff like that. So I mean, earlier you asked, climate change and the urgency to tackle climate change had always been urgent.
Yes.
But when I interviewed, I told you earlier there was like a global youth climate movement. It's led by an international climate organization called 350.org. So they had a tele-press conference for international media ahead of the global youth strikes. So they said something like, even though it's always been urgent to tackle climate change, the fact that young people all around the world have been rising up and urging their politicians to pay attention to this issue has injected fresh enthusiasm and urgency into the matter. Whereas NGOs usually, maybe they previously worked in the background, they try to influence policy, but the fact that you have millions of people millions of school students skipping school has injected like fresh urgency into the movement.
Right. But to a lot of Singaporeans, we've heard a lot of critique that this die-in is a little dramatic or this die-in is confusing, they don't get the point of this die-in. But let's clarify, this is not just about the die-in, right?
Yeah, I don't know why people are fixated on the die-in. It was actually a very, very small part of the rally. In fact, it was only like the 5 minutes toward the end of the rally that they did the die-in. And the die-in was mainly just it's like visual representation, like moment of mourning. Imagine all the people who would lose their lives, the biodiversity that would lose their lives in the warming world. And it is not exaggeration because, scientifically, we have already seen extremes in weather, extremes in, more extreme events, changes in, what else? We're really physically seeing all the changes that climate change is wrecking. Melting sea ice.
Disappearing coastlines, ice sheets sort of speeding up, and sea levels rising faster and faster.
This is very real.
It's happening, happening now. It's not like it's, in the past people thought it was something distant, right? But that's not the case. And, there was a report that came out on the eve of the summit that showed that climate change is accelerating. It's happening faster and harder than even scientists had predicted a decade ago. So,
So the organized, because the die-in was only like 5 minutes at the end of the event. The whole entire event itself was more than 3 hours long, and it was really getting people to urge for greater climate mitigation strategy. So mitigation meaning reduce the amount of planet warming emissions from that Singapore is emitting.
Right. So I think this is very encouraging that the youth are taking this into their hands, and I think we can do more, and hopefully our government may come up with interesting strategies at the end of 2020 to also do more. So thanks for sharing more with us, Audrey and David. And if you'd like to read both of these stories in full, do head on to our website, www.straitstimes.com. Our second story, an analysis by the Straits Times has found that food poisoning is more likely to occur from dining at restaurants and consuming catered food than from eating at places such as food courts, or coffee shops. And with us today to break this down is Tan Yi-Lin, senior correspondent from the Straits Times. Hi, Yi-Lin.
Hi.
Let's talk a little bit about this study. What metrics did you guys use to come to these conclusions?
Okay, we used data that was compiled by the National Center for Infectious Diseases. It's under MOH, and what they've been doing is compiling data on food poisoning, amongst others. And we were particularly interested in this set of data showing us where people were poisoned. Did they suffer from food poisoning after eating at restaurants or catered food or food courts or coffee shops or hawker centers? So what we did was we averaged out data covering 4 years from 2014 to 2017, averaged out each year how many such cases, and then we compared, and we also used data from the Singapore Food Agency on what are the total numbers of these food establishments, and we came up with these percentages, these odds. So what we found out was that 2 in every 100 restaurants, okay, you're likely to get food poisoning. Those are the odds, and the same for catered food, but for food courts and our coffee shops, the odds are every 5 in 1,000 stalls, and then for hawker centers, it's two stalls in every 1,000.
Wow.
Okay, so. Yeah.
That is a significant difference,
yes,
I would say. And that's actually kind of surprising because I think a lot of us would assume that restaurants are cleaner and therefore won't cause food poisoning as often. So how does this, happen still?
According to food safety experts whom we spoke with, they're of the opinion that the reason why catered food and restaurants are at higher risk is because certain types of food are prepared ahead of time, say garnishes or sauces, and if left to cool, you know, once they cool below 60 degrees Celsius, that's when, you know, bugs start to multiply. So between 5 degrees and 60 degrees. So really, so what ought to be done is for food suppliers, retailers, to ensure that food is constantly, heated above 60 to prevent this, bacteria from sitting in.
So that temperatures actually makes it different from restaurants, because hawker centers tend to serve you food immediately when it's hot.
Yes, that's
so
right.
That's why
steaming hot, and then also because you consume the food immediately,
Right.
so thereby reducing the chance of food poisoning.
I see. So for consumers like you and I, how would you say we can prevent this from happening to us as we eat at restaurants or as we eat catering food?
Okay. It's really impossible for us to prevent this. You know, I mean, food with, salad with salmonella and salad with no salmonella, they taste exactly the same, so you can't tell. And
Right.
and bad food with bugs, actually tastes good. So it's really difficult to prevent.
So, it's not like we can taste what food poisoning tastes like. So
Exactly.
how will we know? Okay, well, I mean, that's a good point. I guess maybe let's just, all we can do is be extra careful maybe and follow the advised timings on those prepackaged food. And that's the best we can do maybe.
I guess so.
Thanks for sharing more with us, Elin.
Thank you.
To read all the details in the full analysis, do head on to our website, www.straitstimes.com. And those are our top stories of the day. For more news and videos, once again, do head on to our website, www.straitstimes.com. This has been Kimberly. Thank you for watching The Big Story, and we'll see you tomorrow.